Florina is a minor character from the 7th Fire Emblem game, Fire Emblem The Blazing Blade. She's generally well liked among fans of the series, though far from being one of its most popular characters, as she gets little screen time or development over the course of the game. This has led some to criticize her popularity, calling her a generic shy girl with a fear of men, which is unchallenged due to the fact most of her praise is either for her gameplay performance or for somewhat surface level qualities, like her design, or the fact that she's fluffy. Yet despite all that, Florina is one of my favorite fictional characters of all time, which is a surprising take for anyone who's aware of my preferences or biases for the characters I tend to really like. To give examples, some other video game characters I'd consider to be some of my favorites are Wario, Bowser, Adelbert Steiner, and Dick Gumshoe. It's not hard to see why I like these characters so much. Wario is funny. Bowser is funny. Steiner is funny. Gumshoe is funny. And while yes, Florina is funny is a statement I do agree with, it's not the main reason I like her, and it requires some explanation to why I feel that way. I don't think I need to explain to you why I find Wario funny. Look at him. And I'm pretty sure Florina, being a reserved, good-natured anime girl, is like the polar opposite to Wario as a character. And that's the other thing. She's an anime girl, and I hate anime girls. So I feel the need to explain why I really like Florina, despite her being one of those things. And while she's not my favorite anime girl, that title would go to Celeste Scherer from Final Fantasy VI, Celeste is a character completely integral to the game she's from, is generally considered its best character, and already has tons of videos or articles analyzing why she's a great character, going over the exact same points I would have made. And that's the main reason why Florina is the character I wanted to make a video about. Basically every other character I like, be my favorite characters in general, my favorite Fire Emblem characters, my favorite anime girls, or any other relevant category you want to choose, either A, is a character I wholeheartedly enjoy for obvious or simple reasons, or B, has already been talked about at length by other people, so any reasons I would have shared for liking them have already been stated countless times already. With Florina, I have yet to see a single person say they liked her for the exact same reasons I do, and that's something I don't tend to see often. So let's get into why Florina is one of my favorite characters of all time. Fire Emblem 7 has a 10-chapter long introduction to the game that takes place prior to the main story, called Lyn Mode. This section of the game stars the titular character and was made to introduce new players to the series by showcasing and explaining every mechanic they may run into. It also focuses on a dozen or so characters that would reappear as members of the army later during the game's main mode, Florina being one of them. She's introduced in the game's 3rd chapter, when Lyn, Sane, and Kent rescue her from bandits trying to, sell her into slavery. Fire Emblem references that concept a lot with no real gravity, doesn't it? Anyway, Florina joins your group and fights with you against the bandits, deciding to stay with Lyn & Co. afterwards because of her noticeably romantic for a Japanese-developed game from 2003 relationship with her. And that's pretty much all of Florina's relevance during Lyn Mode. She gets like one line per chapter for the rest of that portion of the game, and none of them have any real substance. And sometimes she doesn't even get that. While Florina does come back fairly early on during the main mode of the game, she only appears in a single cutscene. Since if she hits 0 HP at any point during combat, she, for lack of any subtlety or pleasantry, dies. And Florina's death quote is honestly one of the most depressing in the series for me personally, with her feeling like a burden to others in her final moments. That's just sad. And this is coming from a person who has at multiple points sacrificed characters for tactical advantage. That should probably be in quotation marks. I don't even know if Harkin faced the chance of death when I sacrificed Will to take Limstella's attention off him. I didn't feel like doing all the math and I just wanted an excuse to sack Will. God, I hate Will so much. Will is stupid, I hate his stupid face, I hate him so much, Will is my... got a bit off topic there. I don't want to be thinking about him now. It's Florina month for crying out loud. This is supposed to be a happy occasion. Oh, I have to explain that now, don't I? I found this Reddit post once claiming that since Florina was born in January, the author was considering January Florina month, and that jump in logic has left us deep in my subconscious ever since. They also claim that they are celebrating Florina all month. What does that mean? How does one celebrate Florina? Florina is not a holiday, she is a fictional girl who sometimes appears on my Game Boy Advance screen. I'm celebrating Florina month. I think it was the end of November or beginning of last December when I started entering another Fire Emblem phase, and that was when this post got flashbanged into my mind again, and I decided I wanted to make this video in January, which started out as a joke video on the concept of Florina month, until I realized I kinda just wanted to talk about why I like this character so much. In the process of making the former, I also found out Florina has a subreddit dedicated to her, just like the ones for Evangelion characters and probably a bunch of other anime I'm unfamiliar with. It just warms my heart to know enough people care about my favorite underage anime girl to dedicate one to her. And it's called r/Fluffy Florina. Oh, come on. That's referencing that one line from the Japanese popularity poll I mentioned earlier. How does anyone other than me know about that? But, yeah. Happy Florina month, I guess. What was I talking about before I went on this tangent? Oh yeah, Florina feeling worthless as she gets killed in front of her friends. And that being the reason why she only gets one cutscene in the main mode of the game. And it's also pretty nothing in terms of showing her strength as a character. Like, the bit of her falling off her Pegasus when trying to avoid enemy arrows, and then both her and the Pegasus landing on top of Hector, was really funny when I first played the game, but that's really the only notable thing that happens in relation to Florina, and it also doesn't show anything interesting about her in particular. And, that's it for Florina's plot relevance. 2 cutscenes with her in focus, and a handful of brief insignificant appearances. That's all she gets. Not exactly making a good argument for why she's a compelling character, am I? And if that was all she got, I'd have no disagreements with people finding her fairly generic or uninteresting. But luckily, each character has what are called support conversations, which show them interacting with other characters from the game, and in my opinion, these are where Florina truly starts to shine. She has 21 total conversations across 7 support partners, and I think as a whole, they're pretty great. To start, I'd like to go back to what I think Florina's common perception tends to be, a shy girl with a fear of men. While not wholly inaccurate, they're probably the least interesting things about Florina for me personally. I should note that I find Florina's writing to be a bit inconsistent with regard to things such as the level at which she is afraid of men. She talks with Eliwood just fine, and the only times at which she shows fear toward a male character are when Sane is being sane, or Hector is being Hector, and as much as I love both of them, I don't think either is a good example of the average man. Sane is a literal cartoon character who genuinely falls in love with every single woman he meets. And Hector is extremely loud, outgoing, and headstrong. While her Lynn's Tale ending implies she still holds a fear of men, it's barely ever shown in-game, though Florina notably only has one male support partner, which could be the reason why. As for her being shy, it is a major part of her character, but so is her want to overcome it. What's shown in several of her supports is her determination to become more confident and overcome the shyness that has been ingrained in her personality for all her life, as well as her unyielding desire to follow in the footsteps of her older sisters by becoming a first-rank Pegasus Knight. What can also be seen most explicitly in her talks with Lynn is her being able to speak up and talk fully candidly when she feels the circumstances require it. Lynn happens to be so terrible that she manages to upset Florina to the point she calls her out for it. Not even Sarah managed that. Okay, maybe that wasn't really necessary to say, I just have a strong dislike for Lynn as a character, but I already reviled Will for a bit, so I don't want to send this video off track for longer talking about it. I just don't know if I was ever going to bring that up anywhere else. At least she's not Will. Moving on, I find Florina's resolve not only admirable, but it also directly correlates with how she plays as a unit on the battlefield. She starts out as a weak, frail flyer who can only really see combat against enemies that she's capable of easily picking off. At base, her performance is significantly worse than every other flyer in the game. However, if you're willing to invest the time and effort it takes to train Florina up, she can become a very strong flying unit who can do everything her older siblings can, all because of the experience she gained from her journey. Admittedly, this has little to do with my appreciation for her as a character, especially since I have a bias against units who aren't immediately good and thus don't enjoy using Florina most of the time, but I still thought it was worth bringing up how well the gameplay reflects her as a character. I wouldn't count this under the same umbrella as her being shy, but one of the things I do really like about Florina is her reserved nature, specifically because of how it often contrasts with the other person in their conversations. Compared to other games in the series, I find that FE7 tends to have a lot of characters with boisterous, in-your-face kind of personalities, and of the characters I'd put into that category, 4 of them have support conversations with Florina, and her only support partner anywhere near her level of demurity is Ninian. There's quite a bit of humor to be found here, particularly because in terms of both her conversational abilities and social perception, Florina is just incredibly awkward. And that's not to imply that she's slow-witted or unconscious towards others. No, she just stutters and hesitates a lot, tends to answer questions irregularly, and always talks to people as if they have a similar moral reputability to her, regardless of who they are. Like, remember the bandits that were trying to kidnap her in the chapter she's introduced? Not 5 minutes after she gets rescued by Lynn, she goes back to the same bandits to talk with them and try to reason with them to stop all the fighting. I really like how she says excuse me when starting the conversation. He isn't talking with anyone, so it implies she still has some form of respect for this guy as a person, despite him literally trying to profit off potentially ruining her entire life. Like, Florina, I thought you were afraid of men. Why are you talking to this guy? And that's not a criticism at all. I think this is hilarious, and also entirely in character for her. Her dialogues with her older sister, Florina, include Florina getting embarrassed about stories of times when she acted erratically, doing things nobody would expect of her in specific situations. I genuinely find Florina to be pretty funny, although it's in a slightly different way than the characters I mentioned at the start of the video. Let's take an example from the same game though, Hector. In his first conversation with Lynn, she challenges him to a sparring match, only for him to dismiss the idea on the grounds that he was too strong for her. Lynn assumes this is about her being a woman, setting up an expected outcome of her proving herself against Hector, only to have it be revealed in the next support Hector actually was right and did end up beating her pretty badly. He does compliment her on being better than he expected though, and in their final talk, giving the line, "You are strong, I can vouch for that, just, I was stronger," without any second thoughts or regret. That is completely in line with my sense of humor, even more so because it's at the expense of Lynn. Florina does have some really amusing lines, like when Lynn asks her if she landed her Pegasus on the bandits, her response is "a little," which might be the single funniest thing that could have been said. That's basically the real-life equivalent of answering "a little" to being asked if you hit a pedestrian with your car. But a lot of what I find funny about Florina is less from her lines being hysterical, and more from me just finding amusement in her endearing gracelessness. The reaction I give is usually not a full-on laugh, and instead a small exhale or smile at how charming her dialogue is. In her C-support with Nino, for instance, where Nino keeps asking her questions at a mile a minute, but Florina is committed to answering them all, in order, and is so focused on doing so she doesn't instantly notice that Nino leaves before she's done. I think half of it I find entertaining because it's the kind of stuff that would come out of my mouth. Things like her interjecting the fact that everyone in the army is really nice when that didn't really have anything to do with what was being said, or saying the word 11 times across her talks with Hector alone. And there are actually a few things I find funny about Florina outside of her dialogue too, like her hair. I feel relatively indifferent to Florina's overall design, but I do really like her hair. It is cool and funny. There's also her Fire Emblem Heroes art. Fire Emblem Heroes is a mobile gacha game that I'm still proud to say I haven't spent a single cent on. Shout out to Final Fantasy Brave Exvius for being a mobile game that I've spent no money on and still managed to get basically every character I wanted to play with in a couple of weeks. Now, I don't want to criticize someone's art, Lord knows my artistic abilities are nothing to write home about, but something about Florina's original Heroes artwork is just kind of off, and I don't think I'm alone in thinking that. I think she looks like she's stoned, and the mental image of Florina smoking a blunt is very funny to me. I personally like the Azure Sky Knight design more. Or Ninja Florina, which showcases another thing I find funny about Florina. The fact that in every picture depicting her with other characters, official or unofficial, she is always way shorter than everyone else present. Short people are funny. Finally, I'd like to take a look at two of Florina's support conversations in some detail, specifically the ones involving Hector and Sarah. Let's start with the latter, since it's probably my favorite of the whole bunch. Florina is an extremely likable and sweet individual, so there's a lot to be gained by pairing her up with Sarah, who is an agent of Satan. Sarah is an entirely self-centered, moronic jerk who believes herself to be the ideal of beauty, intelligence, and any other positive quality, and is completely oblivious to anyone else's feelings. If those sound like complaints to you, you do not know me. Narcissistic idiots are quite possibly my favorite type of fictional characters, provided that they are funny and hated by most others, if not everyone around them, and Sarah checks both of those boxes. She might be the single funniest character in the Fire Emblem series. Darn near everything that comes out of her mouth is hilarious to me, such as thinking she's going to find vassals willing to serve her, in her own words, lying around somewhere. Or the insane mental gymnastics she does to convince herself she's actually the one leading the army. But nothing compares to the reaction she gets out of the people she's with. Urk ends their mutual appearances by straight up telling her that everyone hates her and nobody would look for her if she went missing. All of her support conversations follow a similar pattern of Sarah annoying the ever-loving hell out of the other person until they crash out at her, except she's usually too stupid to realize they're actually upset with her actions. All of them except Florina's, which is focused on her coming to Sarah in an attempt to become a bit more like her. I think the best joke in the entire thing is when Florina has to clarify she was talking about her personality, and Sarah is confused by that sentiment. The disparity between the ways they act as Sarah tries to improve Florina's confidence is thoroughly enjoyable to me, as are all of the subtle jabs Florina throws at her that go right over her head, including my favorite quote to show people out of context. It's just very entertaining. I don't have much more to say than that, so let's just move on to the Hector supports, which are definitely the most notable, since Hector is one of the game's main characters, and it ends with the two of them getting married. Now, despite the fact that these are my two favorite characters in the entire game, I don't love these. Don't get me wrong, I think Florina is the perfect love interest for Hector. She is a fantastic foil to a brash, combative warrior with a heart of gold, and him falling for her is a great idea. It's just, there's so little of it. The C support is nothing, and the B support doesn't even have them talking with each other. So there's only one conversation to actually see their relationship develop, and I do kind of like it, but it doesn't feel like a cementation of them being made for each other. I guess they spend a lot more time together off screen? I don't know. I've heard people say they only like Florina because of her being with Hector, so I wanted it to be clear that isn't the case for me. Her relationship with him is what first gave me an interest in her as a character, but now I think I prefer their appearances individually to when they're together. And that should conclude my video about why I like Florina so much. I think I've said everything I can say. In fact, I'm pretty sure she appears on screen in dialogue for less time than it takes to watch through this video, but you may be thinking, sure, this is a fine justification on why you like this character, but it doesn't change the fact that she lacks any meaningful contributions to the plot, or reasons why she can be considered amongst the best characters in the series, let alone all of fiction. And I agree. To answer the question I posed in the thumbnail, is Florina Fire Emblem's most underappreciated character? I don't know, probably not. I just put that there for clickbait. If you think that was the intent of this video, you have fatally misunderstood my position. I am not attempting to take the role of a professor making a presentation on a neglected topic. I am instead trying to take the role of a 5-year-old explaining why he thinks this dinosaur toy he found is really cool. My goal was not to sell you on the idea that Florina is a hidden gem that nobody seems to understand but me, it was just to talk about my own opinion on her and why I feel that way. I like her. Florina is a simple character at the end of the day, and that's okay. Not many of my favorite characters have complex backstories or groundbreaking arcs in development, because that's not what I look for in them. Oh, side note, I'm replacing Kyoko with Florina in my channel banner so I don't have to be reminded of Danganronpa every time I see my channel page. I probably will end up replacing her later too, because having two Fire Emblem characters there, I don't like the fact they're both from the same game. So expect her to be replaced by Boucheron or Ilios or someone later. Probably Ilios now that I think about it. Like, I'll keep Florina there for the time being, but I want to have Ilios there because, for characters like Wario and Florina, I love them, but there are probably people out there who like them more than I do. I genuinely think Ilios is such a niche character, I am probably the biggest Ilios fan out there, though that's a story for another time. The bottom line is, I like Florina, and I think she is a neat character. There's not much more to it than that. I don't have a joke to end this one on, you can all go home now.